Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 8.12 support tier list. You can find timestamps in the description if you want to jump around to your favorite parts, if you don't have time to watch the whole thing, and you can also find access to this Google Doc in the description as well. Be sure to check out my 8.12 new meta explanation video. It's been very popular on the channel. It'll explain sort of what's going on, why are we seeing things like Brand, Mordekaiser, Vladimir in the bot lane, sort of what's the reasoning behind that, what changes in the game have led to that, and what does it mean moving forward, and just what should we think about that. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it somewhere in between? Just be sure to check out that video. It'll help give you a lot more insight into sort of what's going on. It's been one of the more innovative and exciting times in League in years over the last couple of weeks with this new meta, so check that out if you want to see what's going on. Then I also did my bot lane tier list. I just released that yesterday. So that includes things like traditional AD carries, where I talk about, Lucian, Kai'Sa, Ezreal, but it also includes some of these new meta picks that you're seeing more and more, like Vlad, like Mordekaiser, like Yasuo in the bot lane. So that builds on what I talked about in the new meta explanations video and sort of sets out kind of a power ranking list and explains when certain champions are good in different situations in this new meta. So be sure to check that out as well. As far as this video goes, we're going to go, down the list here, and with each entry, I have a mini Google Doc. If you've never seen one of my tier lists before, this will give you a link to the League Wiki so that you can read their abilities. It also has ratings, rune information, and recommended items. So recommended runes, recommended items. If I have an in-depth guide for the specific champion, it'll also have a link to that guide at the bottom. Really quickly, this rating system, if this is the first tier list you've watched of mine, lane pressure, it's on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being one of the weaker champions and one of the weakest possible champions in the role at whatever that specific thing is that I'm rating, and 5 being one of the strongest at the role. And then, of course, you have anywhere in between. So lane pressure is basically how likely is this champion going to be able to assert their will on the lane? How likely are they going to be able to do what they want to do in the lane, whether that's push the lane, pressure with poke, threaten, with kill threat. How likely are they going to be able to run the lane? Okay. Kill threat specifically is how likely is this champion to get kills. So looking at laning phase, but also later on in the game, how much kill threat does this champion have? Safety is how likely is this champion going to die, right? So do they have mobility? Do they have some kind of defense that helps protect them from ganks? Or are they very vulnerable? Scaling, I have an entire video on scaling if you want to check that out on the channel as well. But in general, just how strong does the champion get over time, right? As they get more items, as they get more points in their abilities, as sort of the game unfolds, how much stronger do they get over time? And then reliability is how likely is this champion going to be able to do their thing throughout the game and be played at an optimal level. So this could be hitting skill shots, could be reliability. Do they have difficult skill shots for people to hit? Just understanding their decision making, right? Do they have difficult decisions that you're going to have to make? Is there counterplay on the enemy team, right? So can the enemy team easily shut them down? Or is the enemy team going to have a hard time dealing with them later on in the game? So reliability, consistency, that's what I'm talking about sort of with that stat. How likely are they to be able to do their thing at a high level and have a major impact on the game? Okay, and then as I always say, this tier list is primarily targeted towards a plat minus audience. So usually like plat, gold, silver. It will still be very useful even for people down in bronze 5 or even high diamond, but I'm kind of aiming for that middle of the road when I'm talking here. Some champions are going to be much better at the extremes of different elos. So, for example, something like Alistar or Tahm, Kench, or Braum are going to be much better with highly coordinated teams at higher elos versus something that deals a lot more damage and has a lot more sort of kill threat. Something like a Brand or a Zyra is going to be much stronger at lower elos, right? At bronze, where you can hit those skill shots and people disrespect your damage and you'll just be able to exert your will a lot more on the lane. So there is some variance, obviously, depending on your elo, but in general, I think that the stuff I'm going to talk about here can be very useful to think about for all elos. And just keep in mind that this is also for non-specialists, right? This is people with just a moderate amount of practice. How could they perform on the champion? So if you're a one-trick Thresh player or a one-trick Bard player or something like that, those champions are going to go up a lot in ranking. But if you're not, they're not going to be as good, right? And I'm not talking to, necessarily to you specifically. Like, this isn't a tailor-made tier list for each individual person watching. This is intended for an audience of probably, a few thousand people that will end up watching this video. So just keep that in mind, that just because your favorite champion may not be as high as you think it is, that's not to say that you can't win with the champion necessarily. It's just to say that for the thousands of people that are watching, for the broader audience, I just don't recommend that champion as much as champions that are higher than that, right? So, it's just going to depend. Some players are just really, really good on some champions, and sometimes a champion might be really popular and really strong, like Rakan or Nami, for example, and maybe you're just not very good on that champion. Maybe you just don't enjoy playing that champion, and that's fine. You can play other stuff. You don't have to play, the very best champions to win games, but I think that it's useful to think about this pecking order, not only for your own gameplay, but just to see what other people will likely be playing, what's likely to be strong in your games. So if you don't want to play Rakan, if you don't want to play Nami, then at least you can think in your head and understand why they're strong, and then you can pick good counter picks to them, potentially. Like maybe you could play Blitzcrank more or something like that. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. All right, so, one final thing that I forgot to mention here. I really look at the potential of a character more than their stats. We will look at stats. We're going to use things... like Lolalytics, and we'll look at sort of what's been played in the professional scene, and, we'll look at pro builds and things like that. So we will look at stats, we'll look at what other people are doing, but at the same time, I try to look at the potential of a champion, because there are some champions that are much better than their statistics would imply. So, for example, Rakan is only about a 50% win rate overall right now, but he's very, very strong if you get good practice on him. It's just a lot of people aren't that great on him. So, that's why he doesn't have the great stats to back it up. Whereas something like, I don't know, so I'll have something like Morgana a little bit lower, even though she's going to have a pretty high win rate overall. And that's for some of the things. Well, I guess her win rate's not that high, but who's like Tarek, for example, I'll have a lot lower just because I don't think that he fits into the meta super well in the bot lane. He's great in mid lane if you pair him with something like a Master Yi, but we'll go into that. So I'm not just going down the list and saying, okay, here's the statistics. All right, that's my tier list, whatever the top 10 is here. I look at the stats, but I also think about the potential of the champion moving forward, and just things that may not be reflected in those stats. Okay, so let's start off with Rakan here. Anyone that's been watching the stream for the last couple weeks knows that I have a very high opinion of Rakan right now. I've been playing him a lot on the stream. Now this site, we'll see. Hopefully it's been acting a little squirrely today in terms of his abilities, but we'll talk about it more broadly in general. So, and I hope that this loads up. So what's up with Rakan? Why is he such a high rating now? You're even seeing him quite a lot in pro play. So if you look at, the supports for the summer split so far across all regions, he has the highest presence, which means that he is picked and banned more than any other support. And so, yeah, he does get paired with Zyra, but he's getting picked even without Zyra in the pro scene right now, and he's going to be highly rated in a lot of places. So what's up with Rakan? Why is he like this? I guess maybe it's not going to load up today. We'll see. But basically, he's a hard engaged champion that also scales pretty well with plus healing and shielding, and he's very versatile. So he has a lot of different items he can get. He can go Zeke's, he can go Ardent Censer, he can get something like a Shirelia's if he needs to, he can get Redemption, he could even get Knight's Vow. So he's just very versatile in his builder, and he's very versatile in how you can play him. He can be very aggressive, he can start fights, but he can also peel. And one of the huge things that I talked about on the last tier list, and for the last couple of tier lists when I've really been favoring him, here we go, is his ability to get Zeke's and use it early, which is massive in this meta, and solo queue especially, that's dominated by very heavy AD burst champions, right? So we're seeing a lot more Talons, we're seeing Zeds, Graves, Zen, all of that stuff. Nocturne is super popular right now. And the fact that he can get Zeke's really early is just a huge boon to him. We'll pull that up here real quick, because that's going to be an important item to keep in mind. Because I think Zeke's has become the most powerful support item. It was already really good. It was arguably the most powerful item for the last couple of patches, especially at, challenger level and pro scene. But, Ardent Censer was still really strong. Redemption was still pretty strong, especially those combinations. But now that Ardent Sense of Redemption Mikhail's have been nerfed, I think that makes Zeke's the king of the support items right now. And, a big part of, like, what makes Zeke's very strong is it is very powerful immediately in the early game. So you effectively get 25% bonus damage on your AD carry, like, right away whenever you pop your ult as soon as you complete this item. Whereas something like Sensor has to scale over time. This is something that I often compare it to, because Sensor gives you this on-hit extra damage, just like Zeke's does. But this scales over time. So, like when you very first get this, it might grant you 15% attack speed, and it might grant you 9 on-hit damage, right? Versus when you get your first Zeke's item and your AD carry gets their first, AD item, or whatever it is, they're probably going to have like maybe 150 AD at least, and dealing an extra 25% damage off of that is going to be, I don't know the exact math off the top of my head, but something like 30 to 35 on-hit damage, whereas this is like 9. So it's a lot more on-hit damage for single target. Now, Ardent Sensor can affect multiple people if you're like a Sona and you shield everybody, or Rakan and you double shield. You shield one person, you shield another person. You can put this on 2 different people. So this becomes a lot better over time, with the fact that, it scales up to 30%, it scales up to 20 on hit, and it has this stat plus healing and shielding, which combines very well with Redemption because it gets triple benefit out of plus healing and shielding, and then also Mikhail's. So once you get all the plus healing and shielding combined together, then you would outscale a Zeke's, because a Zeke's doesn't have a lot of synergy with other items. It does synergize with Ardent Sensor in the sense that this gives you more attack speed to trigger the on-hit off of Zeke, so that's good. But it doesn't have that same multiplicative scaling of plus healing and shielding that Ardent Sensor has always had. But now this has lost 2%. That doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 20% less bonus to plus healing and shielding here. Especially if you get multiple items. It's 2% on the first item, it's 2% on Redemption, then it's 5% off of Mikhail's if you get that. And so that's a lot less healing over time. That's 9% less healing and shielding, and the stat has no defensive capabilities, right? It has nothing. It doesn't have health, doesn't have armor, it has nothing. It's got a really nice set of stats, but in a meta that's really fast, where it's going to be difficult to get, all 3 items anyways, and where there's a lot of damage coming at you, there's a 3-0 Talon coming at you at 6 minutes, or like a Nocturne at 10 minutes that's, 3-0. Like, this is not going to give you a lot of protection. So that's part of why Zeke's has become so much more powerful, because it gives you that nice 60 stack of armor right away, which is amazing in the early game. And it gives you this extra damage on your AD carry, and, if you stay close in combat, it gives you extra damage. Gives you an extra 40, pretty much, on-hit damage. And slows people, so you can stick to them. So, it gives you all of these extra bonuses, which is really nice. The flat mana is good on champions that don't have very high base mana regen, which is Rakan. I think he has 8. Basically 9 mana regen. So that's not as much mana regen as someone like a Janna, a Soraka, Sona, things like that. So flat mana is going to be better on him than mana regen. You still get your 10% CDR, but the big kicker is it just makes you very tanky, makes you very resistant to assassins, and it gives you a lot of extra damage at the same time. So the stats aren't as great as Ardent Sensor, but the fact that it's more powerful for single targets early and gives you the resistances really makes this an awesome item. So that's part of what makes Rakan really strong, is he can get this and he can get Ardent Sensor if he wants to, and that double buffs the AD carry. Or he has the option of just going other things if he wants. He's just so flexible in his build. He can go tanky, he can go scaling. In theory, he could even go damage a little bit more if he wanted to get Proto Belt or something like that. I don't recommend that most of the time, but it's on the table. He has very, very good AP ratios. I mean, he has a 0.9 on his passive, 0.7 on his W, 0.8 on his E. Remember, this E triggers twice. So this is a 1.6 AP ratio, every time you cast both of these things. And with a 280 base. By contrast, a Janna shield is 210 base with a 0.7 ratio. So he has over double the AP ratio and 40% more base shield. It's a big shield. Even though they just nerfed it, It's still really, really good. And he has a very like low cooldown, super high impact ult, so he can start fights. That's something also that you'll see with a lot of these top level supports is they can all start fights, and this frees up the top laner and the jungler to play very heavy damage dealers. So you can have your top lane Irelia or your jungle Graves or jungle Zen or whatever. And you can still have engage from the support position. So engage is really, really important because people aren't playing the hard engage tanks anymore, at least in solo queue. You see them some, but not as much as you used to, certainly earlier in the season. And so having a champion that can start fights, that can engage like that, is really amazing. And he's one of the few champions that can both engage and escape. So unlike something like Alistar, which we'll talk about here in a second, he can go in, start a fight, your team doesn't follow up, or you realize it's a bad engage, maybe someone else pops out of a bush or something, like right when you start the fight, you can E back out, so you can go in and get back out to safety. And so he's one of the few champions that has that kind of versatility and mobility in a fight. Now his laning phase is pretty rough. He's pretty short ranged on auto attack, so he can get harassed out. He does have a nice little shield that refills over time. If you hit your Qs, it can heal you and your allies for a little bit. But by and large, it's pretty tough for him. He can get poked out, but a lot of the poke champions aren't being played as much anymore. You're still seeing some Nami, but you're not seeing as many Jannas, Sonas, and things like that. And he can engage and potentially kill some of those poke champions too, if you have a lot of damage on your side. So if you're like paired with a Draven or a Lucian or something like that early, you can blow up that Nami if you get a hold of her. So he does have a lot of all-in potential, especially on ganks. Because if the jungler comes in, you can E over to the jungler to get right on top of them, and then you can W, and if they don't flash, they're dead, basically. So he's really, really good on ganks. And of course, once he hits 6, he's amazing. But even before that, if you learn how to aim this W properly, you can definitely force flashes early on, or just get kills if they choose not to flash. So yeah, I think that's what makes him really strong. So his lane pressure is pretty weak. His kill threat is kind of average. Like I said, if you get the ganks or you have a very aggressive lane, you can make action happen, but you're not going to be doing it by yourself, just completely running the show bot lane like you might be able to do with Zyra or Brand. But he's super safe. This is another reason that he's this far, that I have him this far up, is it's such a clown fiesta throughout the entire game, but especially bot lane now, where people will just camp bottom lane, right? They'll get scuttle and they'll just sit bottom. They'll just gank it over and over and over again, starting like level 1. Right? You're level 1, they hit level 2, off of that scuttle, and they just gank bottom. And so he's so safe because he has 3 different dashes, right? He's got his W to get away. You can go over walls with that. Just great range. And then he has his E where he can jump to people. He can jump twice. Hey, thanks for the sub, Frederick. I appreciate it. He's got his shield. If you're getting Zeke's first, then he's got that armor. So he can build defensive items to an extent. He also has his ult. If you have to use this, you can use this to get away. You just ult somebody. Gives you this huge extra movement speed. 50% extra movement speed. And, goes up to 150% once you touch somebody. And then if you run Nimbus Cloak, which is very good on him, you're just really fast. So you have like 3 different ways you can escape. And you have a built-in shield, which is pretty nice to give you a little bit of protection. And you can build that armor. So he's super, super safe. I think he's the safest support in the game for bot lane. So that means you can position aggressively if you want to apply pressure to a lane, but you can also escape if you need to. His scaling, I think, is pretty high because he can go the enchanter items if he wants to scale. And like I said, he's just very versatile in what he can do. His reliability is a little bit lower than average just because he is hard to play. You have to learn how to hit the Ws. You have to learn how to go in and then go back out. Because, yeah, he is going to be a little tankier on, if you get your Zeeks on the initial engage. But if you don't get out of there quickly, you will get blown up. He's not Alistar with an ult. He's not Leona with her, W. He is very squishy. To focus fire. So, you can take a couple of hits, but you're by no means a tank, and you should not build him as such. If you want to build a tank engage, then you need to play something like Alistar or Leona. His primary, strength is the fact that he can get both Zeeks and Ardent, and sort of his flexibility. So he's like a hybrid champ rather than a pure tank. Okay, runes. I recommend Airy, Nimbus Cloak, Transcendence, Scorch, and then Bone Plating and Chrysalis. I really like Transcendence now because they nerf Celerity so much. like, you can get a little bit of extra AP when you get your Nimbus Cloak going and you use your ult and stuff like that. You know, maybe for a very small amount of time you get 20 extra AP or something, but I'd rather get to that 40% CDR faster and then have a very favorable conversion rate if I want to get more than 40% CDR. Because the 10% CDR translates into about 270 gold, but the conversion rate off of Transcendence, when it translates the CDR into AP, the 10% CDR becomes 20 AP. Then the 20 AP is worth like 420 gold. Or rather, like 440 gold, somewhere around there. And so you're getting like an extra 150 gold worth of value whenever you translate over the CDR to AP. So it's a very favorable conversion rate. So I think it's pretty good. Like, it doesn't give you a lot in the early game, but you're not going to have a lot of that extra movement speed in the early game anyways until you get your ult with Nimbus Cloak. So that, Celerity's not going to do a lot either. It's going to give you like 5 flat movement speed. So I could still see an argument for Celerity. I just feel like Transcendence is going to give you that extra, mid-game power spike to finish off your CDR. And, you can still go Guardian and Revitalize if you want to. More Tahm Kench are going that. I just saw, or not Tahm Kench, Rakans are doing that. I just saw someone today doing that as well in the pro scene, but most people are still doing Airy. This just gives you some harassment early on. And Airy, being able to, like, proc this a bunch in a fight, because you can, like, your shield reapplies it. If you shield somebody, and then you just wait a couple more seconds till Airy comes back to you, and you shield them again, you can get double Airy procs off your shield, or off of hitting people with your Q. You can proc Airy a lot in fights, or if you're taking Baron or Dragon, or whatever, you can proc Airy a lot. And it does give you some harass in the lane. When you land some Qs, you can definitely make it happen. So, like, what I'm on now, I've tried the extremes both ways. I've tried going for, the Guardian route with Coin, and then I've tried going the Airy route with Eye of the Watchers. And I think just going somewhere in between is what I prefer, which is what a lot of the pros are kind of moving towards. It looks like it's about a 50-50 split between Coin and Eye of the Watchers. I prefer going Coin into Nomad, but then still having Airy plus Scorch early on. So that gives you a little bit of early aggression, so you can do something in the laning phase. And then it also gives you that gold income and that guaranteed wards before 10 minutes. And I think that's where at least a decent chunk of pros are going these days. Like, you're at such a risk if you go Frostfang, that if they camp you, or you just have a really bad lane, or they're just really good at dodging your Qs, then you really risk, like, not being able to get your awards until 15 to 20 minutes, which is really bad. And then if the game for some reason does go to 30 minutes, if it ends up being one of those more rare, longer games these days, you're going to fall really, really far behind in gold. So it is nice to have the extra AP in lane. That does give you more harass. That does give you more all-in potential, because he does scale so well off of AP. But you're sacrificing your wards, usually by at least 5 minutes, a 5-minute delay on your wards, sometimes more like 10 minutes. And you're sacrificing potentially like 1,000 gold, if the game goes to, 27 to 30 minutes, something like that. So it's a pretty heavy price to pay to get a little more early game pressure when he's not really that great of an early game champion anyways. So that's how I've been striking the bargain. I think it's worked out well. You keep the Airy, you keep the Scorch, a little bit of pressure early, but then you get the coin for those early wards and the inevitable gold as the game unfolds. So, Nomad, Ionian, and then Zeke, Ardent, and Redemption. If you have, a non-traditional AD carry in your lane, so you have like a Mordekaiser, or you have a Vlad or a Brand or something like that, then you would probably want to stay away from the Zekes and the Ardent, and you could just go straight into something like Redemption plus Athenes. If you want to, that would give you a lot more AP burst. Especially if you start with like Athene. So it's not the most cost efficient item, but it does give you a high amount of AP at a pretty cheap price. So you could start with like Athene's Redemption and then get Ardent Sensor later if you want to. Zeke's and Sensor can still be useful if your other lanes have a lot of auto attackers. So if you have a Yi in the jungle or like a Yasuo middle, it might still be worth it to get, Zeke's or Ardent early. So it's just kind of up to you. You have to read the game, but he does have build options for non-traditional supports where you can go for a more aggressive type of build if you want to. Okay. Well, that's a lot about Rakan. Let's go ahead and move on here. So, yeah, super strong, very versatile, very safe. Just an excellent pick here. He is a little bit harder to play. I'd say, you know, he's one of the harder supports to play. Not as hard as, like, Thresh or Bard, but he's pretty tricky to use correctly because you have to have that finesse. You know, you have to go in the fight and get out and sort of make the right decisions. And just hitting his W if you don't have your ult can be tricky sometimes in some hot situations because it does have that delay on it. But still very good. Okay, and like I said, in the pro scene, he's definitely very highly represented. But I think even in lower level play, even if you're a gold player or a silver player, like you can still win off Rakan because he has that engage, but then he can also escape. So you're not just completely stuck if your teammates just sit there and, you know, do nothing when you go in, right? You need to make sure, I say this a lot in my coaching videos, you need to announce when you're going in. Like you need to ping it, you need to ping your cooldown, like ping your ult so they know you're about to use your ult. And then ping the target. So hold down Alt and then left click on the champion you're going to target. So if you're going to target that Nami in lane, let them know, okay, ping that you're going in, you know, ping your ult a couple of times, ping the Nami, ping that you're going in again, and then go in. So give them a lot of notice if you can. Now sometimes, you know, you just spot a very rare opportunity and you just have to take advantage of it quickly. But in general, you want to give people at least a few seconds notice before you go in so they're ready to go. So that's just a word of advice. It's really important for engaged champions like Rakan, like Alistar. So just keep that in mind. Okay, Nami, now that she's statistically the highest champion right now, at least at Platinum, and she's probably still high at like lower elos, maybe not as much so if we look at like, you know, Bronze in the last 7 days. Yeah, she's still going to be up there. So like I said earlier, Brand gets a lot better. Brand and Zyra get a lot better at Bronze, but she's still going to be pretty good, even in Bronze, so really strong. So what makes Nami strong? I've talked about her in several past videos. It's very similar to Rakan in that she is pretty versatile. Okay, these links are just like sketch. They're not usually that weird, but it's acting weird today, so I think if we just go out and then go back in by clicking on this, then maybe it'll work a little bit better. Maybe not. I swear this website's usually really good in like all my other videos, but today it's not good. So I guess we'll just talk about it then. Pretty much she has really high lane pressure. You know, with her W, you can just walk up, you can be very aggressive, just W spam on people. You'll almost always win the lane as long as they don't hard engage on you. So you need to be very careful about that. What? Well, it's not going to affect this video if it went offline because I'm not recording it online, but I may not. Okay, we'll see. I don't know what's going on with the internet. My daughter may have pulled the plug or something, but anyways, so Nami applies a lot of early game pressure. She is pretty good with non-traditional supports because if you do hit your bubble, then you can go all in on people. What happens if I try to refresh this? Is it just going to screw it up? So you can go all in. She does apply a lot of pressure early. She gives people really good sticking power with her E, so... okay, well, I guess I shouldn't try to refresh. We can at least look at the tier list, though. While this is recording, then you can go back through, I guess, if you want to, and just click on the Google Docs, and we'll see if the internet comes back on in a little bit. Tell you what, give me just like 10 seconds here. I'm just going to just peek around the corner and just see if my daughter unplugged a cable or something. What?
Where are you?
Is internet access working for you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. It looks like we might have the internet back. Sorry about that. I don't know what the deal was. She's been... I don't know if she did that with the cord or not, but it could just be something, some squirrel outside on a power line too. Who knows? But anyways, so lots of good pressure in lane, lots of good synergy, particularly with Lucian, who's very popular right now. Whenever she puts that, or when she puts the E on him, his double shot procs both E's, like pretty much instantaneously. So it's a lot of burst damage. She can heal through poke, so if for some reason they do pick something like a Sona or maybe even like a Zyra, you can heal through some of that poke. It's not super efficient to heal. It's better to use it aggressively, but she is really strong. I do have a guide for her on the channel if you want to look her up, but I've talked about her in a lot of the tier lists. She's still really strong. I just have her down a little bit right now just because she can be vulnerable to assassins. She is one of the safer enchanters. She can get Zeeks if she wants to. It's a little awkward on her. But she at least does have a fairly low cooldown ult. Let's see if we've got it back. Okay, we got it back. So she does have at least a fairly low cooldown ult that you can do, which slows people, and she can stick to people with her E. So one of the important things about Zeeks is you want to be able to hold people down when you ult, so that your your AD carry can go in and auto attack a lot, so they get that 25% bonus. But the website itself is still acting strange. Okay, at least we got the internet back though, I guess. So yeah, just a lot of kill pressure, lots of versatility. If they do have, a 5-0 Z, you can get Zeeks. It is viable on her. It's not always optimal, but it is an option on the table. They just redid Athene's. Athene's is extremely good on her because she puts out pretty good damage, pretty decent healing. You don't get credited for Athene's when you put your E on the AD carry, though. They get that damage. That doesn't stack up your Athene's for bigger heals. That's a little unfortunate, but overall pretty good, pretty versatile. Excellent ranges on her spells. Her E has like 900 range. Her W has like 725, but it can bounce. So you can, heal your ally for 725, and it can bounce for an additional 725 to go hit an enemy. So, she has somewhere close to 1500 range, right, of influence a lot of times. It could even triple bounce past that and go past 2000 range of influence in some, very unique circumstances. But just very good, very versatile, good healing in lane. She can go aggressive, she can go defensive. She has the option to get Zeeks if she wants. It makes sense on her. Like, you really wouldn't want to do something like a Zeeks on a like a Janna or a Soraka, just because they have longer cooldown ults, and they don't have a lot of ways to hold people in place. Janna actively blows people away when you press your ult, so that makes her. That puts her in a pretty unique spot, like I said, for enchanters. The mix of offense and defense and her capability to build a Zeeks if she really wants to. Okay, Zyra is up on tier 1. I don't remember if I had her in tier 1 last time. I think I did. I mean, Zyra's rising up a lot. Now, the thing about Zyra is if you're good on Zyra, and I get requests to play Zyra all the time. She's one of my signature champions on the channel. I played her a lot, over the last couple of years. And, okay, we get her. All right, we get her abilities. She has received some buffs fairly recently, which is nice. I mean, one of the most notable ones is she has 15 mana regen at level 1, which is ludicrous. Why? Why does she have more mana regen than like Sona or Janna or something like that, right? So she has insane base mana regen early on. She has 575 auto attack range, which is more than most AD carries. It's certainly a lot more than Lucian and Kai'Sa, who are both low range champions. And she has 340 move speed, which is pretty good for a mage. I think Lulu has like 325. So, pretty good, like, just base stats all around. Her armor is not, like, amazing, but it's okay, like, for a squishy enchanter. Her base health is pretty low. So, I mean, she's squishy, but she has pretty high base mana with really high base mana regen, big range, good move speed, so she's pretty solid on those fronts. And what makes Zyra really strong is people ask me, well, Zyra versus Brand a lot. The thing that makes Zyra a little bit better in my mind in a lot of situations is that she can harass through the minion wave much better with all of her spells. So she can use both her Q plants and her E plants to harass through the wave. So she can all in through the wave with her E, and she can just harass with her Q if she wants to. And it does a lot of damage. And she can do an extreme amount of burst damage too, especially when she pops level 6. You can just completely delete people. And so she does a lot. It's a lot more consistent poke and a lot more consistent all-in single target burst damage than Brand. Now, Brand does do a lot of damage. We'll talk about Brand here in a second, but I would say that her ability to harass and all-in is more consistent than Brand by just in the abstract, right? If you have someone that can hold them still in your Brand, so, if you have a a Varus on your team or an Ashe in your brand, or if it's a brand AD carry paired with an Alistar or something like that, then brand gets better because he gets to land all of his stuff guaranteed. That adds extra consistency to him. But I think that extra consistency that Zyra has by herself is just a lot more reliable for solo queue and a lot more solid. Now, she is harder to play because you have to put the plants down every time you cast a spell, and, her E is a little slow. It can be difficult to hit if you haven't practiced it. So that's definitely a thing. Another thing that's useful about her is like her ability to scout with the plants. So you can spawn a plant in a bush that has a control ward in it, and it still gives you full vision of the bush because it's not coded as a ward. The plants aren't, and so that means that the control ward doesn't shut it out. So you can get full vision of an area and then clear out that control ward without having to worry about someone sneaking up on you while you're clearing that ward and killing you, because you'll have full vision. And if they do want to come up and fight you for it, then your plant's already there to play defense for you in the lane. Hey, thanks so much, DD Cesar. I appreciate it. Appreciate the sub. So I think that just makes her just more versatile. She just has more consistent threat in lane. She has better scouting. She has more consistent, higher burst single target damage than Bran. And she just does a lot in the laning phase off of very little items, right? So even if you just have your Frost Fang and like an Amp Tome, you can usually zero out and kill people with one combo at level 6. So she does an alarming amount of damage early on. So she's very strong. She is, however, a little on the weak side when it comes to ganks. If you get flanked and ganked, you're going to die later on in the game. She gets a lot worse versus assassins. This is why I hesitate to play her sometimes. It's like, yeah, I can go, 5-1 in the laning phase or whatever and just completely murder the lane. But then when my mid laner feeds that LeBlanc 3 kills, or the jungler feeds, the Nocturne 4 kills, or whatever, then I'm just going to blow up instantly. I have almost no defense if those people get behind me. So she really, really does not like the Fiesta. She's very strong in laning, and she's very strong in team fights. If people actually group up and do a 5-on-5 fight, she's very strong. But if everyone's just running around Clown Fiesta style and they flank her, she's just going to get destroyed. She has virtually no defense. She has no flashes, no dashes, no extra move speed, no defensive steroids. She's just gone. If Talon pops over that wall, or LeBlanc, or Fizz, or whatever, she's dead. Pretty much. I mean, if you hit a miracle-like combo on them if they just run straight at you, and it's something that doesn't have a way to avoid your roots, then you might be able to zero them out. Or if you catch them, if you're hiding in a bush and they're walking next to the bush and you get the first hit, yeah, you can probably kill them, but it just gets a lot dicier outside of the laning phase. So she's super good in the laning phase if you can snowball really hard and close out the game. But if it's going to be a Fiesta, it can be rough. So be very careful picking her into assassins. But if they don't have assassins, they don't have a lot of dive or flank, she's definitely really good. And she's good with these other pairings too, these alternative AD carries, right? And you'll see a lot of the AP champs are rising up a lot. Zyra, Fiddlesticks, and Brand are all going up a lot, because part of it is because of these alternate bots. Zyra's great if you have a Brand AD carry, for example, or a Mordekaiser, or a Yasuo, or whatever. Just some other very heavy damage dealer early on. She's great. Great with Lucian, great with Draven. Also, she doesn't have to worry about getting outscaled by enchanters as much, because the games just end before enchanters can get to their 3 items, and those 3 items have been nerfed: the Redemption, Ardent Censer, Mikhail's. So those items have been nerfed. The games are so fast they don't get to all of those items. And just the meta in the bot lane is so aggressive that you can snowball off of it really hard. So I think that all of that is why AP champs in general have gotten a lot stronger over the last couple of patches. Okay, Alistar is another one who is seeing a lot of play. Especially in the pro scene, he's the second most picked. He's only has a 40% win rate though, so it's like he's picked a lot, he's banned a lot, but he doesn't win a lot, unfortunately. And like the reason for this, he has very strong laning pressure. With his WQ combo, he can all in your Sona, your Nami. He's pretty good into Rakan if you're fast enough to hit your Q when he tries to W you, or you can headbutt him out with your W when he tries to go in. So You know, he just doesn't quite have that same versatility as Rakan does. That's why I would play Rakan most of the time. But he can tower dive early, which is really nice with this early game aggression. You know, when you hit level 6, you can tower dive really easily. He does a lot more damage than Rakan does early on. If you get your combo and stack your E, you know, and then you proc the Aftershock on him, stun him with your E, ignite him, that's a lot of damage. He's very good specifically with Yasuo, who's becoming very popular. And, you know, his ability, like, he has more reliable just WQ combo on people than Rakan does. Rakan has that slight delay, and it's a much smaller radius on the hitbox. So Alistar's has a much larger radius. That it's just more reliable pre-6. Before Rakan gets to level 6, it's more reliable all-in lane. And he can actually stick in the combat and not worry about dying early on. And, you know, if the game's fast enough, he may not even care. Once again, he's not going to get outscaled, similar to Zyra and Brand, because no one's going to get to those 3 items in this meta, where it's a lot more rare. And so he's fine just going for mobility boots. He doesn't need any items. Just like mobility boots, okay, good to go, let's do this. But he can also use things like, you know, Zeke's or like Knight's Vow. Zeke's is a little awkward. He does have ways to hold people in place with his WQ and then his E, so that's nice. He does have that slow field, because he can stay in melee combat a lot off of the Zeke's itself. So Zeke's is a pretty good buy on him. You know, Knight's Vow, also pretty good on him. So you'll see that as a combination on a lot of champs now who can go the Zeke's, Knight's Vow, Locket combination and be able to keep up and compete with the, you know, the Ardent Redemption Mikhail's combo if you ever get to 3 items. Okay? So he is good. He has great all-in engage, great kill threat in lane, but he's not getting out, right? If you go in and your team doesn't follow up or it just starts looking really bad, you're going to die. So you're going to have a lot of deaths. Does it say deaths? It says KDA. So I don't see precise like deaths, but if you notice, his KDA is one of the lowest of any of the supports that are played. And that's because he's so dangerous in these pro games, at least, right? Like Rakan has a 3-9. You know, even Braum, who's also a tank that gets caught up in fights, you know, are going to have lower KDA. Like Tahm Kench even has like a 3.8 KDA. So that just tells you he's very, very dangerous. If your team is losing or if they're going to lose that fight, you are going to die. And that's bad, right? That gives the enemy team extra gold. You lose presence on the map. It's just not good when you die, obviously. And so he's really dangerous. So you need to communicate extra well whenever you're going to engage, and you have to learn how to back up and let your teammates die when they're doing stupid stuff, right? That you have to do that as Alistar, or a lot of these tanks that don't have a reverse gear. Leona, Alistar, stuff like that. Like Rakan can go in and try to save people, and if it fails, half the time he can still get back out. But Alistar, 100% you're going to die if it starts looking rough. Hey, thanks, Ocean. Ocean Omega, thanks so much. I appreciate the sub. But he is a lot stronger just because of that kill threat. Great with Draven, great with Jhin, great with Lucian, great with, you know, Brand, Mordekaiser, just all of this, like, really early game stuff that can be aggressive. He's a good combo with that. Okay, Fiddlesticks is another one that's starting to see a bit more play. Right, so his win rate is, like, okay. Like, down in bronze, it's not as great. Is he even here in bronze? Did I just overlook him? Yeah, he's still up here. So he's at 51%, is pretty good. But if you move up a little bit to like platinum for the 7 days, I guess it's about the same. It's up like a percentage. So like, what's up with Fiddlesticks? Why is he rising? Well, similar concept to Rakan, that he can build defense early and still be very effective at doing what he wants to do. So he can get that hourglass early. The arm guard has a lot of armor on it, so he's not going to get blown up by assassins as easily. And that just happens to also be really core with his kit, where he can ult and then hourglass and initiate fights. So he can initiate fights like Rakan. He gets armor like Rakan early on, and he has really good CC like Rakan early on. Just the trade-off is he is a bit more dangerous because he's not as mobile, so he gets the armor, but he doesn't have the mobility, but he does a lot of damage. If you've never looked at Fiddlestick's numbers, they're bonkers. Like, his damage is through the roof with virtually no items. And that's what you'll see with a lot of these AP champs that are played, is they don't have to have any items to do a lot of damage. So if you look at things like, Brand or Zyra or Fiddlesticks is a good example. I mean, look at some of these numbers, right? His Drain, even at level 1, does 400 damage if they sit in it for the full time. Now, yeah, they do have to sit in it for 5 seconds to make that happen. But still, that's a lot of damage, and it heals him for quite a lot. 900 damage with a 225% AP ratio if he drains for the whole thing. These bounces, when you throw this crow on people, you could get up to 200 damage on a single target. Now, it's not going to do that much most of the time, but it's very cheap. You can just spam this crow on people in the laning phase, and it's going to do, pretty guaranteed harass, kind of like the theory behind why Soraka has been so popular the last couple of patches. If you just press E on somebody, it's guaranteed to trigger Scorch and Airy. Well, you can do that on Fiddlesticks, too. If you throw an E at somebody, it's guaranteed to hit them. You can't miss it. It has an extremely long range. At least that's what it feels like. You could even throw it on the minion wave. You don't even have to get within 750. There's probably a 90% chance it's going to bounce to them if you just throw it on the minion wave. And a lot of times it can hit at least 2 people. So you're paying 50 mana early on, and it's almost always going to hit both champions if they're anywhere close to each other, at least once. So it's going to be doing a 0.9 ratio with 90 damage or 130 damage rather with a 0.9 ratio for 50 mana, which is a lot. And then it also pushes the wave. So he's very, very good at pushing the wave safely from a distance while simultaneously harassing potentially both enemies with very efficient mana costs. And he has very, very strong CC. I mean, this CC is so frustrating. I mean, I know people probably experienced it before. 2.25 second. That's about as long as... I think that is actually literally as long as a Malzahar ult. Except once he gets CDR, it's on a 6-second cooldown. And it's a similar range, 575. I think a Mal's ult's might be 600 or 650. So it's a little close range, but my god, is this annoying. And you don't have to sit there and channel it either. You can just fear him and then go do something else, unlike Malzahar, who has to channel it. Now, Malzahar does a lot more damage. This does 0 damage, so that's important to note. But, that fear duration is just brutal. It used to be 3 seconds back in Season 3, if you want to think about that for a second. But that really made you want to pull your hair out. But it still is very, very strong. If they don't get a Quicksilver Sash, they're going to die. So this makes him very good against assassins. If the assassins don't blow him up immediately, this actually does have a cast time on it, which is frustrating. It's not instant. It has a quarter of a second cast time or something. If they can kill him before he fears, it's all good, but he is one of the few champions that has an answer to something like a LeBlanc or something like, a Fizz or a Talon or a Zed when they try to go in. He can fear him, and the team can deal with it and kill him. He's also very good against things, just anything that's going to be close range that's squishy. And there's so many champions like that out there right now. It makes him very good. So he has a lot of damage. He has very good push and poke in the laning phase. Great scaling, CC ability, and just a powerhouse ultimate. Now, the fact that it's 140 seconds at level 1 is kind of frustrating. But it does a total of 625 damage at level 1. Up to 1,600 damage at level 3. Yes. 1,600 damage with a 225% ratio. So, if you can get good vision control, obviously, and ult over walls, and, you land your ult on somebody and fear them, they're almost certainly dead. So, this makes him very strong. Now, he doesn't have high attack range. He only has 480. He's very squishy. In terms of armor or health. I guess his numbers are a little bit higher than Zyra. He has lower movement speed, though, lower mana regen. But basically, in the laning phase, you just constantly spam your E, push the wave, poke him out, just wait till you get to 6, and then start to get vision control and just try to look for good Crow Storms. So, I think that he's really good. I mean, he might deserve to be even a little bit higher than this right now, but... he does take some getting used to. He is very vulnerable. If you get flanked, you're probably still going to die. You can fear him, but you just don't have any movement speed to get away a lot of the times. So that can get pretty iffy. Shirelia's used to be pretty decent on him, but after the changes, I'm not sure if it's worth it or not. Probably not. I think you still just want to go Like just Hourglass into like Void Staff or something like that. Let's see what people are getting on old Fiddle here. Twin Shadows is decent. That does help you, you know, be a little bit safer, but that also does give away your position, which is really important as Fiddlesticks. You want to make sure they don't know where you are a lot of the time. Yeah, some people are getting Shirelias. You're still seeing a decent amount of Shirelias, so I guess that's what you want to do. And this is twofold. Once again, it keeps you safe to make sure that you don't get run over. But then also, after you ult, you can pop a Shirelias and make sure that you get into the middle of the team. Or even if your ult's on cooldown, you could still just pop Shirelias and just run at them, you know, and just get a fear off, and sometimes that's good enough. Now, this is interesting. More people are going Aftershock on him. I haven't seen this build. So I didn't look up, like, the newest Fiddlesticks build, because I just assumed it was going to be just airy. That's guaranteed poke harass in the laning phase. What's the thought process here? I mean, I guess it's just because you're really squishy. You know, whenever you fear somebody, you do get Aftershock. I guess that does give you some burst damage. I'm going to have to look into that. That would let you get Bone Plating, Chrysalis. Unflinching feels pretty bad, but, I mean, I guess you could do it. You could do Revitalize. That'd give you better drains in lane to help you sustain yourself. Nimbus Cloak is amazing. And, you know, Celerity is also pretty good on him. I just figured Airy Scorch because it's so easy to proc both of those in the laning phase, but maybe it just depends on the matchup. A lot of people, I mean, I can see it like this is better for the mid game so you don't get blown up, specifically before you complete your Hourglass. I would think you would want to get the Hourglass component though, right? Yeah, this is perfect timing because that saves you, that's 600 gold value because you don't have to buy it. Like, that's a very good value, especially because your items are so expensive. I don't know, man. It's hard to turn down perfect timing and Cosmic Insight. I guess maybe you don't need Nimbus Cloak. It is nice. I don't know. I mean, clearly a lot of people are going Aftershock right now. So, I guess that could be a thing. You know, try it out. I haven't tried it out yet. See what you think. You are giving up a lot of harass in the lane, but you are getting better potential all-in. I mean, maybe you can be really aggressive and go for kills in lanes if you have Fiddlesticks. Like, you could go up, you know, fear them, and then just sit on them and drain them while Aftershock's ticking. Maybe that's why. Like, this is more for poke and push, and maybe this is, you know, more for all-ins. Gorilla's trying it out. I mean, I'd trust in Gorilla. Approach velocity is actually pretty interesting. Yeah, he's going the Revitalize thing. 3 points in Dark Wind for harassing lane. What's he against? Against Rakan. He is a very good pick into Rakan. I don't know what was bot lane. Cannon? I don't know. I'll have to try it out. So you're basically giving up poke, but you're going to be a lot tankier. Maybe that's worth. That would give you some extra protection against assassins. So something to think about. Go try it out. Okay. And we'll move a little bit faster here. So I did bring Brand up quite a bit. You know, historically I've always said, you know, why play Brand when you can play Zyra? But there is becoming a good reason to play Brand, and that's because people are overloading on melee. In a lot of these matchups, you're seeing melee bottoms now, like double melee bot. You know, you'll see like, you know, Mordekaiser, Alistar, or, you know, Pyke plus whatever else bot lane, Pyke plus Yasuo bot lane. So you're seeing like more melees in the bot lane, at least one melee bot lane, sometimes more than one. You're seeing a lot of melee junglers. You're even seeing some melee mids. You're seeing more Irelia. You're seeing more Yasuo. And of course, melee tops are popular. So it's not uncommon to see teams with 4 or 5 melee champions. And this is really important for Brand because he loves fighting melee fights because everybody's clumped up, which means the bounces are going to be hitting more people. And it just makes it a lot more difficult to position so everyone doesn't blow each other up. Um, so that's really important. You know, this can do, if everyone's clumped up, you know, it has 5 bounces, has 500 damage early on. Or let's say it bounces 4 times, so it hits the first person and bounces up to 4 times on different people. But yeah, I mean, he just does a ton of damage. He wants people to be clumped, like Conflag bounces to all kinds of different people. Pillar of Flame, AoE in a small area where people are clumped up. And then, of course, the passive, when everybody blows up. This is like everybody that gets hit by the explosion. It's not just the single person who explodes. It's everybody around the person who explodes gets hit. And so when you have like 3 people where this is triggered on them in a team fight, they all blow each other up at the end. And so it just makes it very difficult in a chaotic fight where everybody's grouped up to win. So he's kind of like the ultimate team fight support right now. And that's why you're even seeing him played some in the AD carry role. Is just because everybody's clumped up and you can just blow them up like this. It's also really nice if you have other CC with him. So that's why you're seeing him in the AD carry role more paired with things like Alistar, because Alistar can hard engage, and when Alistar knocks him up, you know, it almost guarantees that you're going to be able to hit him with the stun, right? So this has been a problem of like brand support is a lot of AD carries don't have a lot of CC early on to hold people still. That's reliable. You know, you have like a Jhin, W that could be nice, but then you're just relying on stuff after that, like do they step on a Caitlyn trap? Do they step on Jinx Chompers? There's just not a lot of really reliable, okay, we're going to lock this person down. So now that you can combine that with brand, you can have your Alistar, you can have your Thresh, your Pyke, you know, something like that bot lane. That makes this potentially a lot more viable. So that's nice. Now I will say on a related note, if we look at the AD carry bot lane and the win rates and presences, you'll notice that a lot of the highest win rate champions are traditional AD carries, right? So this is organized by presence, by how popular. Most of the most popular champions are still AD carries. It's Lucian, that have any sort of pick rate. That's not like one pick. This is across all regions for the summer split so far. 52 Lucians, so by far the most presence. 61 bans, 56% win rate. Okay, so pretty high. Kai'Sa, next highest. 58% win or picks, 24 bans, 55% win rate. Okay, Vladimir. Okay, so this is the first goofy pick that's popular. 28 picks, 47% presence, 43% win rate. Vlad's not winning a lot. Okay, so you're seeing Vlad a lot, but he is not winning a lot. Now, people are still learning him, but I'm just pointing this out because just as I am in every video these days and on stream all the time, AD carry is not dead. It is just the all caps videos are just hyping up these other roles. Are these other things viable and interesting? Yes, I talk about that in the video I mentioned at the very beginning. But that doesn't mean that AD carry is completely dead. It's still a good, you know, viable role if you're playing the right AD carry. And people might say, but all these other AD carries, so many of them are weaker. There's always a large majority of AD carries that are weak, right? When it's like a Caitlyn meta, you know, you can play Caitlyn, you can play Xayah, you can play maybe Varus, and that's it. Like, you've never been able to play Caitlyn, you know, Vayne, and Lucian all in the same meta because Caitlyn starves all of them out because she has too much range. So, you know, it's really important to keep that distinction in mind, as there has never been a meta where all 15 AD carries or whatever are all viable at the same time. It's always been, you know, there are 3, maybe 4 AD carries that are strong, you know, in pro play, and the rest, you know, just either don't get played or have a really low win rate. Okay, so you still have at least 2, and this were my number 1 and number 2 picks on my tier list, even before I saw this data, right, for the pro tier list. They're not pro, but just for the solo queue tier list. So Lucian, Kai'Sa still very strong. Ezreal fallen off a little bit as well. So Vladimir's fallen off. Ezreal's fallen off. Now Yasuo does have a high win rate, but he's very rarely played bot lane. He's only been played 8 times. Mordekaiser, however, now Mordekaiser is a little bit more of the real deal. You know, he's been played 17 times, and he has a 59% win rate. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on there. Now, it's still a pretty low play rate compared to you know, Kai'Sa, Ezreal, and Lucian, which, by the way, are still the most played by far. Like, Vladimir's in there in terms of presence because he's been banned so much. Because he's a flex pick. He's a real pain in the butt for teams to try to pick and play around because he can be played top, mid, or bottom potentially, and so that's part of why he's banned out. That's because it just creates matchup nightmares. But it's still like the most played champs are Lucian, Kai'Sa, Ezreal. Okay, and then you have kind of these spicy picks sprinkled in here. Varus isn't doing so hot. Kog'Maw's doing okay. You know, Rizebot's doing okay. And stuff like that. Okay, so I'm just pointing this out to just say that, like, Brand is interesting. He's spicy. Do they have... Okay, so Brand has been played 6 times, and he has a 33% win rate. But it doesn't mean that you have to play Brand every single game, right? So just keep that in mind. So he can be played AD carry. He can be played support. He is a little bit better as support against all of these other melee champs, but just throwing that out there. Okay, as far as Morgana goes, Morgana is still pretty represented. She has a high win rate in solo queue. Overall, are we back on? Yeah, we're back on plat. So she has a pretty high win rate, I think, right? Is this organized by win rate? But she has fallen off a little bit. She still has 51.7. She's very good into Rakan specifically. This is why I ban her out all the time in solo queue. She's good against Rakan. She's good against Leona. She's good against Thresh. She's good against most supports that aren't other enchanters. So historically, she can get outscaled by Janna, by Soraka. And Mikhail's could cleanse her Q, which was really important historically as well. But now people, you know, just aren't playing those champions as much. Mikhail's got a lot worse. Mikhail's got hit harder than any other support items. It's, you know, 5% off instead of 2% off. So that was pretty rough. So that makes Morg a lot stronger. Now, Morg does have problems against heavy AD burst because her shield doesn't provide any mitigation. So if Talon jumps over that wall and flashes your Q, you're dead, and your AD carry's dead, probably. You can't do anything. You know, your W doesn't do anything, your Black Shield's not going to do anything, your ult is going to be too slow. So that's something to keep in mind. Or like Zed ult somebody, you know, you don't have any protection. You put a Black Shield on, it's not going to do anything. So she is weak against heavy AD teams, but she's very strong against heavy CC teams, especially Magic CC. So she's still pretty good in the meta. You just want to be very careful and make sure they don't have a lot of AD on their team if you're going to play her. But she is pretty reliable. She can push early. She's got the Black Shield. She's someone who can go Zeke's as well and Hourglass early on if she wants. So she can get that armor to protect herself a little bit from some moderate AD damage. But she just doesn't offer that much protection to other people. If they have a lot of AD, if the enemy team has a lot of AD and your team doesn't have any armor. Hey, thanks for the sub, Enzo. I appreciate it. Okay, Leona's another one who's coming back into vogue quite a lot. She got played a little bit in the pro scene, but not a ton. Just have a nice win rate. So she's been played 10 times. Pretty legit. But she's being picked specifically into Rakan because her E follows Rakan's W. So if you tag him with the E and he tries to W away, it'll chase him all the way to his destination. So she is very good against Rakan specifically and against a lot of these other kind of squishy champions. So she's pretty good against like Fiddle, pretty good against, you know, Nami, Sona, a lot of these champs. Now she can have a problem against like Thresh. Tahm Kench destroys her. Braum is very good against her. Tahm Kench, by the way, well, this is in pro play, but he still has like a 62% win rate when he's played, so he's very strong. I think he's getting stronger in solo queue too. You're seeing Shen support a lot more in pro play, but it's not winning a lot. It's only 41%. Morg is winning a lot. She's at 62%. Braum is winning a lot. Alistar, not so much. So Tahm and Braum still alive and well in the pro scene. I think they are getting a little bit better in solo queue with the nerf to enchanters as well. But yeah, Leona, just very good all-in, hard engage. You know, if you have Draven on your team, Lucian, you know, Mordekaiser, Brand, all of these other, you know, non-meta, AD carry, you know, picks, she's really good in that type of meta. You just have to make sure that, and she's a very, like, strong early game champion. If you get an advantage, you can push your advantage and just completely crush and overpower lanes with Leona. You just have to make sure you don't get camped. If your team is losing, or you get camped bottom lane, you know, that can be a real problem. If they pick something like a Janna, that can be a problem too, but Janna is not getting played as much. That's why Leona hasn't been that great historically. I mean, she's always been pretty good in like bronze and silver, but like once you get to gold, it's been a lot harder to play her just because Janna has been so strong, and Janna just counters her so hard, and Tahm Kench can counter her so hard. Morgana counters her really hard. But if they don't have these peel supports, Braum is pretty good in there. If they don't have the peel supports, though, if they have the squishy, enchanter type of supports, or like squishy Pyke or squishy Zyra or whatever, and she gets a hold of them, she just can delete them. And if she gets a lead, it's just like every time your ult's off cooldown, you're going to just evaporate them. So, Leona's definitely coming back. She's really strong. She's one of the best, like, all-in, real hard engage, heavy damage dealer tanks. So Alistar is a little bit more guaranteed, and he has a lot more tankiness on his ult, so he can tower dive a little bit better. But Leona has higher burst damage than Alistar does with her sunlight procs. And her ult, she has more range where she can engage. She can engage with her ult from like 1100 range. It's not loading up for us, but her ult has like 1100 range, which is great. So, I think that she's definitely really strong, specifically against other squishy champions in lane, although she does struggle against other tanks or, anti-engaged champions like a Janna or a Morgana. Okay, Pyke has actually come up quite a bit. Now, statistically, he's not going to have a great win rate, right? So, if we go down and look at Pyke, he's still sitting at like 47%. The last patch, he was like 41%. So, people are figuring out how to play him. He is seeing some pro play representation, although he's still not winning a lot like you're seeing him more. He does have 53% win rate, so that's still pretty good. That's pretty legit for an assassin. People are figuring out how to build him a little bit more, so a lot of people are building him with Aftershock instead of Electrocute, because he has really high base health. And so anything that's just an infusion of armor or magic resist is going to be pretty good on him. Some people have been experimenting going like full tank on him. I'm not sure if that's the way to go. I really think Dustblade is integral to who he is because he can proc it so easily by going invisible. And he, like, every time he uses his ult, he blinks, so he gets another proc of Dustblade every time he ults. And then autos. So it's really good for getting those resets. And, like, part of his rise is he's deceptively, like, really safe. As a champion, because he has that E, which just gets him out of almost anything. Not only is it a dash, but if you try to chase him, then it stuns you as well. He has that invisibility, which also gives him a huge burst of speed. So he's kind of like the Rakan of assassins, sort of, in that, he can be very aggressive in lane. You can posture aggressively and try to get those hooks, but then if the enemy tries to gank you, then he can get away from that. And he's just really good at sneaking up on people, right? If you sneak up while you're invisible, especially at lower elos, and people just don't respect invisible champions, being able to run up invisible and then just like, E-dash onto people and then Q them and hook them, like, he's very good. So, like, he can land his hooks, he can just dash through and stun people with his flashes and then just spear them. And he does quite a bit of damage, so that's really nice that people are figuring out how to play him. I've come to respect his safety a lot more. He's very, very annoying to try to catch and kill. It's very difficult to kill him a lot of the times. He's deceptively very tanky, especially with Aftershock, and he just has so many dashes and escapes. And the fact that we're seeing more AP champions enter the meta again, right? And so especially in the bot lane. So, if you have like a Mordekaiser or a Brand or, Vladimir, a lot of these other, AP champs bottom, then that means that people are going to have to get magic resist. And that also, and you're seeing, he is a support, but you're just seeing a lot more AP. And Talia jungle, for example, big AP jungle presence now. In the mid lane, there's still a lot of AD champs, but there are a decent chunk of AP champs that are still really strong. Zoe, super popular right now, for example. So that means that there's less armor stacking, right? There's less people that are going to be going Ninja Tabi, on every single person on a team. Less people that are going to be rushing, Chain Vest. And so that helps him out a lot, because that was one of the huge weaknesses that I said when he came out, is you weren't seeing AP. Bot lane was pretty much all AD, with the exception of Kai'Sa. doing mostly magic damage. But bot lane was almost all AD. Junglers were all AD. It was Zen and Graves all the time. And then mid lane was also a ton of AD. You were seeing, like Talon, Yasuo every game. Well, it has switched up. So now most teams have at least 2 AP threats on them. And so that's not as much of a problem as it used to be. So I think that it's, he's rising a little bit in the combination that people are figuring out how to play him better. The meta is shifting such that not everyone is stacking all AD on a team anymore. And games are just a lot faster. The enchanters got nerfed. Games are faster, so it doesn't matter if you don't scale that well into the late game, right? You just get that Duskblade. As you see, a lot of these games, it's like Duskblade, game's over. If you get a second item, Black Cleaver. But you're not getting to 6 items, so it's fine that you function very well off of a single item power spike like Duskblade. So that's just a great meta for him, especially if you have a lot of other damage. Like if everybody's playing massive damage and you just get to clean up kills, it's awesome. He wouldn't be good in like a tank meta where fights last for 30 seconds and games last for 40 minutes, right? But in this meta where fights are over in like 5 seconds, where, a common score is like 40-40, even in like some like challenger level games, that's exactly what he wants. He loves the Fiesta, so I think he's great. It's possible, if you're a really good Pyke player, he could be tier 1 at this point, but for the general population, I still think he's really risky. A lot of people are still learning and they don't know him very well. So I feel more comfortable just keeping him around tier 2, but he's definitely rising quite a lot. Okay, Soraka's fallen off a little bit here. We're kind of nearing the end of the list here, or the end of the video pretty soon, so we'll speed up a bit. But Soraka's fallen off just because there's just too much damage. Like, especially now with early game burst damage champions like Brand, like Yasuo, Pyke, all of that stuff is just too much damage. You can't just sit there and farm off. Like, sometimes you can, but you're just going to get blown up in this meta. So yeah, you might be able to harass some people with your E still. That is nice, but if you're facing double Targon's bottom, or I don't know, like Alistar has a heal, if you're poking out Pyke, he can just heal it back in the bush. There are just so many champions. Rakan gets like healing off of his Q and he gets a shield back every now and then. So there are just so many champions that can deal with her harassment. If it's Lucian, he's going to get a Vamp Scepter anyways early on as he builds into Blade of the Ruined King. So he's just going to heal through it after his first back. So her harassment just doesn't matter as much as it used to. And it's just even more Fiesta. It's like Fiesta into Overdrive on this patch. And she just doesn't want that. She wants nice, clean team fights where everybody's lined up. It's 5v5. You have a front line that can protect you. And you just don't get that in a lot of games. On top of the fact that they did nerf all the plus healing and shielding items a lot, and she has to get those items. She doesn't have alternative builds, She can't build a Zeke's. I mean, you can, but it's not going to be great because she can't hold people still most of the time, and you have a really long cooldown ult. So she doesn't synergize very well with Zeke's. You can get Athene's if you want, I guess. But, like, by and large, the best build on her is still going to be, Mikhail's early, because you need that health regen. The mana regen converted to health regen is really important for canceling out your W, right? Or for, like, negating, right, the damage that your W does to you. And she really thrives on the plus healing and shielding because she has such a low cooldown heal, and it needs to be very efficient because it costs you health every time you cast it, so you want max benefit. So she really needs the stat plus healing and shielding the way that she's designed right now, and they nerfed all of those items, right? And even, like, a lot of champions just aren't even good with Ardent Sensor anymore, right? Like, Mordekaiser bot's not going to get a lot out of that. Brand bot's not going to get a lot out of that. So I think that the item nerfs and just the meta shifts have definitely hurt her quite a bit. So she still probably has a pretty good win rate. Yeah, I mean, she's still like 51.5%. But I think things are definitely trending against her a little bit. Okay, Braum is definitely up. As we saw, he's still alive and well in pro play. He's particularly good against Ornn, who's really popular right now. He's very good against Brand, who's really popular right now because his shield stops both of those things, almost immediately. He's pretty good against Rakan. Like, he can't stop Rakan's hard engage, but his shield can block a lot of the follow-up from his allies. So, yeah, he's great. He's still very tanky. The nerf to enchanter items helps him a lot. He can just go Guardian, and then, he can still get Zeke's if he wants to. He can also go Knight's Vow, lock it. So he's just in a pretty good position this meta. He's also exceptionally good with Lucian, because Lucian's double shots stack up the Braum passive twice as fast. So, that's particularly powerful. Looks like a lot of people aren't getting Zeeks on him. Some people are. I mean, just the standard, like, Knight's Vow is still pretty good, too. I don't know about Locket first item, but I guess maybe against Zyra that makes sense. Yeah, just really strong. Great team fighter. Great at skirmishing. Great at the Fiesta. Is pretty strong on invade. Strong early game. Good synergy with some of the top 80 carries. Good counter pick against some of the really popular team fighting champs like Brand, like Ornn. So yeah, I think he's pretty strong in this patch. Janna has fallen quite a bit. She is still viable though. People are like, you can never play her. You can. She's still good. And she's just not like the unequivocal, like, best first blind pick, in every single matchup, right? So she still has good disengage. That's great against all melee. The enemy team has like 4 melee champs. She's still great at that. The shield nerfs probably don't matter that much. Like, your shield is going to get busted up before 5 seconds anyways most of the time. It does suck a little bit that, it does decay now, but, if you're putting it on someone on the front line, it's going to get busted up before 5 seconds anyways. If you're putting it on someone on the back line who's not getting hit, if you're putting it on your 80 carry anyways, then the shield aspect doesn't matter as much. It's just getting that extra 40 AD on your 80 carry, which is nice. Another thing is, like, the 80 carry meta has shifted, so people aren't playing crit as much, and she is best with crit champions because that AD becomes even more valuable when you crit with it, versus something like Lulu, where her attack speed benefits these on-hit champions, so things like Kai'Sa, because they just attack a lot faster. So the attack speed is more valuable than the raw AD on a lot of champions this day and age. Now, if you have someone like Talon or Zed on your team, then yeah, the AD is still going to be a lot better, or Graves, the AD is going to be better than the attack speed. So there are definitely some matchups in comps where, the AD is still really, really good. And I mean, her ultimate still heals everybody for like a ridiculous amount, pushes everybody back. She has great disengage. If the enemy team is trying to play like Lee Sin or Zac or just anything else trying to dive in, her tornado is still going to be awesome. She can still throw down some poke with like her W and some auto attacks in lane, so she's all right. She's just not like the unstoppable goddess, that she was before, after some of these changes. So you could still win with her. She's still solid. She's seen some pro play, not a lot. But, she's still 57% the times that she's been played. She's only been picked 7 times. But she's still good in the comps where she's good. All right, she's still good at peeling. If you do get a hyper carry, 80 carry, she can still be really good with that. Okay, Lulu's another one. Lulu has blown up. She's very, very popular in the mid lane right now. We aren't seeing her as much as support as you can see. She's only got a 33% win rate. I'm not precisely sure why this is. I think it's because she's very vulnerable to all ends early on. She doesn't have a heal. Her ranges are pretty low. And so if she gets ganked, she just gets evaporated. She has virtually no escapes. So that's part of what the deal is. You are seeing her played quite a bit, I think, in the mid lane. Yeah. She still only has a 45% win rate, so she's still not like completely destroying everybody mid lane. Zoe looks like she's still the best mid laner in terms of like pick, presence, and overall win rate, at least in the pro scene. But she's seeing some play. Like, she's good against assassins with her W. She's got the polymorph. She can buff up the 80 carry. But once again, if you whimsy Mordekaiser, I mean, I guess that does give him extra move speed, and it would give Vlad extra move speed too, so it still is useful on those champions. It's just not as useful as it is on someone like a Kog'Maw, for example, or on someone like a Twitch, for example. They just aren't seeing as much play these days as they have in the past, so she is strong. She does throw down some harassment. She has a really terrible matchup against Nami in lane, because Nami can harass and heal herself. So she's alright. I just feel like she can get bullied out by a lot of these champions early on. Like Alistar will just blow her up. Fiddlesticks will poke her out. Brand, Zyra will just massacre her in lane. So it's kind of a tough meta. But if in those niche cases where you do get the Kog'Maw on your team, or you do get the Twitch, where you think you're going to be able to just farm it out, she's very good into things like Tahm, Kench, and Braum, because she has that great scaling off her whimsy, and they don't really harass a lot early on. So, she is good in those types of matchups. but you need to be very careful blind picking her. So she does have a lot of power, but it needs to be, in the right compositions. Hey, thanks so much, Whispering Sage. I appreciate the sub. Okay, so Tahm Kench. I think Tahm Kench is coming back. I think he's coming back a little bit. Obviously, he's coming back in the pro scene. He never left in the pro scene, right? But, in solo queue, one of the big problems with Tahm Kench has been just itemization. You would just get poked out and blown up, by Lulu, Sona, Nami, all of that stuff early on. And just Aerie was so strong. Hey, thanks, Oscar. I appreciate the sub. Aerie was really strong. So, that's definitely something to consider. But people aren't playing that as much, and he's very good against melee champions. So first of all, he's really good against CC. So if people are going to play things like Leona, if they're going to play things like, Morgana, Ashe, Varus, a lot of stuff like that, then he's going to be a lot stronger against the CC champions. He also does a shocking amount of damage, especially to tanks. If people want to play Nautilus, he crushes Nautilus as well. So he does just a ton of damage. I don't know if it's going to show us. It may not show us as usual, but I think it's like if he eats somebody and he has a full level W, it's like 32% of their max health. Now you should be using your Chomp to save allies more so than to hit or to eat enemies a lot of the time. But it says his difficulty is 1. He's actually quite difficult to play correctly. Not mechanically, but like to decide whether or not you should eat an ally or eat the enemy, or like which combos you're going to use and how to use his ultimate effectively. I don't think he's a 1 on the difficulty scale. I think he's probably closer to a 3. Like, he's not as hard as like Thresh or Bard to play, but he still is going to be difficult. So I think he's good. He's really, really good with Zeke's. And this is something I was talking about when I was recording a Tahm Kench video the other day. A lot of people forget you can just cast your ult with Tahm Kench and cancel it immediately. It only goes on a 10-second cooldown, and it does activate Zeke's. So you can actually use Zeke's once every 30 seconds, and he's very effective with it. He wants people to stick to people with the slow field. So, he can apply more lick stacks and hit them with their Q, maybe eat them if the situation calls for it. So it's an exceptionally good item on him. He likes the raw mana. He has terrible base mana regen. It's only 6 mana per 5 on base. So he loves the flat mana. He loves the armor, the tankiness. He has a short cooldown ult. It can be as low as 10 seconds, but even if you just cast your actual ult and transport someone over to the enemy, it still is only like a 120-second cooldown. So that's really, really strong. And you're having very vulnerable bot lanes that don't have a lot of mobility. So if you can get your jungler and warp in behind, the bot lane, Mordekaiser, whatever, insert other squishy champion without mobility bot lane, Nami or something like that, if you warp behind them, you're probably going to get kills. So, he's a lot better against stuff like that than he is against, like Ezreal. I mean, Ezreal is still pretty popular, but there's a lot of gank opportunities is what I'm trying to say. With your Tahm Kench ultimate. He's very good with Knight's Vow also. He's very good with Locket. So the fact that all the enchanters got nerfed, he loves it. He's good against CC. He's good against a bunch of melee champions. He's just really solid. And it's not going to matter that you can't get Ardent Censor if you're not playing with an Ardent Censor AD carry, right? If you're not playing with either Lucian or Kai'Sa, which those are very popular. But if you have something else, he's going to be great. So he is difficult to play. He doesn't have as much, like, just raw kill threat in lane as other champions, but he has quite a bit of utility. And I think he can be really strong if you practice him right now. So it's kind of at the bottom of tier 2. He does have very unique niche that he's good at. So Thresh is another one who's risen up just a little bit, and this is the last one I'll talk about sort of in depth here, and then I'll just mention some of the honorable mentions real quickly. Thresh is still very good. If you're good with Thresh, this is the best that he's been in a long time for you. And a lot of that is because Janna has fallen out of favor a lot, and he is really good at peeling hard engage also with his Flay. So specifically something like Zac or Lee Sin, if they try to jump on you or your AD carry, you can flay them back. And that's the role that Janna has served with her Tornado and her ult. So he doesn't have the scaling of Janna, but he can serve that role if you need it. And he can also engage with his hook. right? And he's very safe with the Lantern at saving allies who are overextended. Your AD carry just has to push up to tower and harass, even though the gank's coming and you ping it back. They don't listen to you. You can throw a Lantern, boom, still get them back out. So he's just a great combination of safety and aggression, but he's the hardest support in the game to play, right? Because you have to hit difficult skill shots like your hook and the timing on your fillet, and it requires coordination with your allies. They have to actually click on the Lantern, and he's pretty unforgiving. You know, if you get caught out, if you're out of position, you personally do not have a lot of escapes. You're probably going to die. So, you know, it's a combination of skill shots, coordination, and just very unsafe and, by himself if he gets caught out. So he can be very strong, but he can also be pretty weak. He has terrible matchups against Kinch and Morgana, so you have to be careful. Some matchups are very dicey, like against Zyra or Brand. It's really, really dangerous. If you catch him, you can kill him, maybe, but they're going to have a lot better time harassing you out of lane. He has really low base stats. So it's a dangerous game you're playing if you're playing Thresh, but if you're really good with him, this is definitely the best that he's been in a long time. Okay, other honorable mentions. Sona's creeping back up there a little bit. She does have a lot of early game aggression. She does scale really well. You know, I could see a world where you could get a Zeke's on Sona. You probably don't want to do it, but if you had to, you could. In a dire situation, just because she does have an ult to help hold people still. Like, pretty much nobody's doing that, but, you know, you could get something like Ninja Tabby and Zeke's if you really needed to. A lot of people just aren't going to pick her if they have a hard engage burst champion. You see most of the champions that they're picking Sona into are other enchanters, like Morgana, you know, Janna, Karma. They're not picking her into Leona, right? They're not picking her into most hard engaged champs. So there's a couple where they may have picked her early and then the enemy picked something like Zyra. But you need to be very careful if you pick Sona to make sure they don't have hard engage, or you're not going to have a fun time in lane. So mostly she's picked as a counter pick to other enchanters because she outscales them really hard later on in the game. So she's very good with Athene's, which just got buffed. So you can go Athene's Redemption, like a common build might be like Tyr. Athene's Redemption could be legit, and then Ardent Censor. So you don't have to get Mikhail's, so you don't feel that pain the same way that like Soraka and Janna might, because she's so good with Athene's. So she's in a decent spot. If they have an enchanter on their team, then you can pick her and feel pretty confident that you're going to have a good matchup. So she is a nice counter pick there. She might deserve a spot in tier 2, but I just cut it off at 10 champions. So yeah, she's pretty good. Taric is somebody that is really good mid lane right now with that cheese strat with Master Yi and some of those other goofballs. I still think that bot lane, he can have a problem. He is pretty good against hard engaged bot lanes. So if they have like a Leona or something like that, he can be good, but I just feel like he's a little slow to get going. He doesn't apply a lot of lane pressure. You know, he has to get tier. His scaling is okay, but it's not as good as like Sona. I would just rather play Sona most of the time if you just want to play the team fight scaling game. But, you know, the extra armor is very good when everyone's playing AD. There are AD assassins running around everywhere. I think it can definitely be pretty legit. So, you know, he's better than he has been in a little bit, but he does have a high win rate. What's his play rate? He still played a decent amount. So there are certain matchups where he could be good. I mean, I suppose he's pretty good with these other like melee champions, maybe like Mordekaiser, you can protect the Mord. Or Vladimir, you can protect Vlad with your ult while he runs onto the back line. There are definitely some circumstances where he could be pretty good, and you just rush like Tyr, Knight's Vow, Locket, and have a pretty strong team fight presence. So I could see him being pretty good with, if you have a good like 5v5 team fight, or if that's what the enemy wants to do is to 5v5 team fight, then that could be pretty solid. Okay. And then the one of the final honorable mentions that I wanted to talk about here is Veigar. I do think that Veigar could become a better support. Like, I don't think that right now he's, you know, tier 1 or tier 2. If you're really good on him, he could work. As you can see, like, he does not win a lot. at higher heals. He's very vulnerable to assassins. But if you pair him with one of these alternate bot lanes, right? If you pair him with Brand or you pair him with Mordekaiser, and you can just trap people in that circle, he has a lot of burst potential, you know? And if you're facing it like an all melee team, you can trap a bunch of them in that circle. So he has pretty good team fight presence, pretty good all in, good push early on. He's just super vulnerable to ganks. So I don't know. I mean, you're probably better off just playing something like Fiddlesticks or Brand or Zyra, but it is something to consider. If they have like a 5 melee team, then Veigar might be a decent AP option if you want, just because that cage is going to be so brutal against that many melee champions. Okay, Blitzcrank could be higher. I just feel like other hook type of champions are going to be better, like burst champions. You know, not even hook, but just hard engage burst champions like Pyke, you know, Alistar, even Thresh. He just doesn't have enough utility. Like, it can work if you are able to hook them, you know, and get some of those squishies. It can be good. I just feel like it's not as reliable as some of the other options out there, but you can definitely make him work. Bard is someone else who has a lot of early game aggression, but he's just so hard to make work. It's so hard to just get your teammate not to die while you go get chimes, even if you tell them, even if you pick a really good time to do it. I just feel like it's a huge gamble to leave lane to go get those chimes. Now his ult, you know, does have some powerful interactions in the game. He does have some early game aggression, but his range is so low. He only has 500 auto attack range, I think, and this is going to make you very, very vulnerable to something like a Brand or a Zyra in lane. Because if they get a hold of him, yeah, 500 auto range. If they get a hold of him, he is going to get evaporated by some of these early aggression lanes, or even something like an Alistar engaging on you, and the Alistar has a Draven backing him up, like, you're just gonna get destroyed. So that's the problem with Bard, is he's so short range, and it's such a dangerous kill threat meta bot lane right now, especially just getting ganked early on. You know, if you're near a wall, like, you might be able to escape with your E, but you know, it's just tough. So you can make him work, but at the same time, there's a lot of oopsie, you know, potentials in there with Bard. Karma, I just don't like her right now. I just think her numbers aren't high enough. You know, if you want to play something that harasses early, I just think Nami's better in virtually every way. She just has more CC, better harassment, better combination with popular champions right now. Like, Karma's really good if you want to, like, speed your whole team in. If you have, like, 3 bruisers, like, maybe you could pick her to, you know, run your Mundo and your Trundle and all that into a fight. Like, she could be good, but I feel like there are just better options up there that are a bit more versatile. So in the right composition, you know, she can work. But Vel'Koz is an interesting case. He does have really good matchups in lane against Zyra and Brand. But the problem is, later on in the game, he's super vulnerable to assassins because he has to stand still and charge his ult. So if you have, like, a heavy team fight composition, like with tanks that can hold people still and they don't have a lot of engage, like, he could be good, but he's just going to be Nocturne food, you know, in the mid game, or Shaco food, or, you know, Rengar food, or whatever. He just has a huge bullseye on his head, and he has virtually no defense. So awesome laner, awesome lane counter pick to Zyra and Brand, but just super dangerous in the mid game. Zillion can work, you know, it's just a reliability thing. You know, if you land those double bombs every single time, he can be a beast, but he can be vulnerable early on to ganks. His scaling is kind of suspect. He doesn't have really good runes or items that really match sort of what he wants to do. I mean, he does save people against assassins, which is really nice. You know, if you have a high priority threat, like, he'd be great with, like, a Vladimir probably, because then the ghost would be able to stay up. So, or not Vladimir, he would be good with Vlad too, but, like, Mordekaiser, I meant to say. So, like, if they try to all in and kill the Mordekaiser to get rid of the ghost, then he could save him, and the ghost is still going to be up fighting and attacking while that's going on. So, and then he's going to have Hourglass. So I could definitely see him being strong in some comps, but I think it's questionable. Shin is really popular in the pro scene, as I mentioned before, but it's just not panning out. It's got a 41% win rate in solo queue. You know, it's even worse. It's like, well, it's not worse, but it's not great. It's 47%. And I realize, yeah, I have Pyke and Tahm Kench higher who have a lower win percentage. I get that. But he can work. It's just, he doesn't have a ton of...
Call my dad.
Do what?
I forgot to call my dad.
Oh, no. I think after the removal of Banner of Command, he just doesn't have great item choices. Like, I mean, I guess you can just do Knight's Vow and Knight's Vow Locket, and I suppose that's fine. Like, he's just not a very good Zeke's user, and I feel like that's what's in vogue with most of the tanks right now. Like, what's really strong is that Zeke's. You know, you can have some all-in kill threat with your taunt. That's good. So, I don't know. Like, he's okay. He can work. I just feel like there are probably better tanks that have a bit more utility than he does later on. But he can work. I mean, he's all right. Nautilus is another one. Like, maybe Nautilus deserves to be higher. I've been seeing him a lot more in games. It's just, in my mind, he just doesn't quite have enough burst damage. He does have a good guarantee, you know, damage on his ult. I played a lot of Nautilus in Season 6. He was my highest win rate. I think he was like my second or third most played with 57% win rate. That was when the Enchanters were very weak, and Enchanters have fallen down a little bit. They're still okay. They're not as weak as they were back then, but they're still pretty solid. I know he has gotten some buffs recently, too. I mean, to be honest with you, I haven't played him recently, so, you know, he might be better than I think he is. I've played against him several times, and we just always destroy him, I feel like. He has low move speed, especially for a melee champ. I think part of it is his attack speed. Like, he does have a really good root duration with his attacks, but I feel like a lot of times, you know, when I Q in and dredge line somebody and I'm going in for that auto attack, they have time to blink or dash out. And it's just like when you're trying to tag people in a team fight like that assassin killing your AD carry and your hook's on cooldown and you're trying to go over and just auto them, sometimes it just feels a little slow. His damage is really low compared to other champs. You know, like, if you hit him with multiple waves, yeah, you can do a bit more damage with your E, but compared to the burst damage on someone like Alistar or Leona, or like other kind of hard engaged tanks, this is just a lot lower. The mana cost is also exorbitantly high for what it is. Now that was a major... Is that right, Rory? Are you mad? Oh, she's mad. Oh my god. And she starting to turn into a zoo around here. The cat's running around, the baby's crying in the hallway, my wife's talking to her parents on the phone. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up. So yeah, yes, he does have a good engage. Now, one thing about his hook, it does have a longer range than people suspect. It is a very, like, wide hitbox. It is much easier to hit this hook than Thresh hook or, like, a Pyke hook or even a Blitz hook. Like, this thing will hit people. One of the issues, though, is it does not go through walls. So you cannot get those surprise hooks over walls on people. You can use it to escape, however. So you can use the hook to try to get out of there. So that's nice. So I think, like, the biggest thing for me, and his defensive steroid is pretty weak compared to others. I mean, it only starts at a 65. I mean, it does give you 9% of your max health, which is good. But it has a pretty long cooldown. You can escape and you can zip around the map because it refunds this by 50%. So you can, like, rotate around the map pretty quickly with this if you have to. But I think the mana cost on this is pretty high to make this, like, reasonable wave clear. The damage is pretty low. So, you know, even if you hit him with, like, both waves, I mean, it does go up a lot. If you have it maxed out and you do hit them with both waves, which usually only happens if they're trying to run away from you, you know, it does 350 damage. That is a lot on a 5-second cooldown. But it doesn't have any max health percentage damage. This is a very strong ult, though. You know, it does knock him up for 1 second and then stuns him for a lot after that. Up to 3 seconds total. It can hit multiple people. There's no way they can dodge or get out of this. I mean, if they have, like, an hourglass or something, they can blink away or flash away to get into a more favorable position, but I don't know. I'll have to try. Maybe he deserves to be higher. I just feel like right now, as of this video, you know, without playing him again, I just feel like either Thresh, Alistar, definitely Rakan are just going to be a bit more impactful. I think the biggest thing is it's slow, right? Like, his auto attacks are slow. His ult is slow. It allows people to reposition. His hook doesn't go through walls. But, like, open field, I think he could be good. I'll just have to test it. So I've got him in, honorable mention now. But if I test it out some this patch and it works out, he could definitely move up a little bit next patch because, the enchanters are scaling a lot less. Now, he is really bad into Tahm, Kench, and Morgana, but so are all of the engaged champs. So, I don't know. He's okay. Try him out. It's one of the best patches in a long time for Nautilus. I'm just not entirely sure about him. And then Ornn is another support that is questionable. He's got 43% win rate. Where's Nautilus on the win rate chart here? Okay, I mean, 48, not bad for a hard engaged tank. Yeah, I mean, Ornn can be strong. I think people might just be playing him wrong in the bot lane. I don't really know. I'd have to play him again, but it's the same kind of thing as Nautilus, where I think it's just slow, kind of predictable what he's going to do a lot of time. He does have an extremely powerful teamfight ult. We are seeing him in the AD carry role sometimes. I think maybe he just needs more items. Like, he just doesn't have a lot of base stats. Like, he requires a lot of armor to make him work. I'm really not sure why he's not played, honestly, as support more, and why he has such a low win rate. Maybe people are just bad with him in the support role. I haven't looked at him in a while. They've nerfed him a lot over time. I think a lot of it is his base damages are just so low. He does do max % health, which is good. This has it's like long cooldowns also, whereas bot lane is about more like consistent trading and pressure. Like, maybe his cooldowns are just too high, and it's just too unreliable, and it's just too short range. But maybe if you're like facing double melee bot, maybe he's a lot better because his ranges are really low on stuff. So against ranged champions, he probably struggles. He doesn't have any like sustain in his kit either, so he can get poked out. That's probably it. Is there's just too much range, too much poke, too much action in the bot lane, where he just wants to sit there and have a farm off against another melee champ in the top lane. Maybe that's what it is. So, anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Come check out the rest of the content on the channel. We have a lot of stuff for support and other roles as well. And then we live stream every night starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So come check it out. We have a really fun, awesome community. I try the best that I can to interact with the chat, even during games. So it's a great time. So come check it out. But it's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.